All right, welcome everybody to GitOps the Planet. I am your host, Dan Garfield. You can find me on Twitter at Today Was Awesome. I am the Chief Open Source Officer and co-founder of a company called CodeFresh. I'm an Argo maintainer, and I do a lot of work on GitOps. As you know, if you've seen Open GitOps, the standard, this is something that worked on with a lot of other people, and very happy to do that. So got a special show today for you because we're bringing in one of my favorite people. Her name is Anais, and Anais is a phenomenal dev advocate working at Aqua. Previously, had the pleasure of working with her at CodeFresh, and she's really jumped into the cloud native space in the last few years. She did 100 days of Kubernetes, which has been very popular. She's done a lot of YouTube work. And then before that, I think you came to the space from like a little bit of a crypto background, which has been interesting. And so, Anais, is there anything I missed in my intro?
Hello. No, that's great. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that I started 100 Days of Kubernetes while I was at CodeFresh. Yeah, so that kind of got me started in the space.
Yeah, phenomenal. And then, yeah, we've got, I think, some interesting stuff to talk about today. So I think our topic is essentially CI/CD and supply chain security. And this is something that you've really expanded on a lot in the last year because you went to Aqua Security and have been doing a lot of security-based work.
I just wanted to mention that you say that I'm working in Aqua. Yeah, I wasn't paying attention.
No, you're good.
Yeah, so I work for the open source team at Aqua Security on our two main open source projects, which is Tracy, a runtime security and forensic tool, and Trivy, which is a very popular all-in-one security scanner. And that's basically used by lots of different companies for supply chain security. Do we want to expand on what we mean by supply chain security?
I think we should, because that's our topic. But obviously, when we think about security, there's kind of runtime security and, penetration testing that is like, hey, is my, my firewall in order? Do I have any vulnerabilities that are exposed to the internet that someone could send some package or some sort of malformed packet or whatever that would allow them to escalate and gain access? That kind of attack is actually, I think, not that common anymore. I mean, there's quite a bit of work that goes into making software secure. And it seems like supply chain has become much more the target rich environment for getting into places.
I remember when I was at CodeFresh, there was this huge, I guess, security issue hack. I don't know how to specifically call it, by a company called CodeCav. They do code coverage scanning, right? Mm-hmm. And they targeted specifically getting, like, the hackers basically managed to modify the packages that get installed into your pipeline, into your CI/CD pipeline, because it got installed through scripts. And I remember that very well.
It wasn't a CodeFresh vulnerability.
But no. You were oh gosh. Yeah, just to clarify, it nothing to do with CodeFresh. Just that's one example of how people target software supply chain issues. Right, with security issues.
So, I mean, going back like earlier in my career, we had, I was at a company. Let's put up the story.
The name.
There was this company years ago, and they were doing old style, software development, web design stuff. So it was a lot of like Dreamweaver, where it's like you build the stuff locally, you SSH or FTP onto a server, you upload the files. That's how you updated the website. And there was a developer who opened a bad email, and his machine was compromised. And so the attackers noticed that he had access to all of these web servers, and so they basically injected cookies. I can't remember exactly what it wasn't injection cookies, but they basically injected a bunch of malicious code into every website that he had access to. And so suddenly there were like hundreds of websites, and they were all of this company's customers' websites that they had gained access to. And it was all because just one developer clicked on a bad link. Now that kind of supply chain attack isn't as common anymore because of CI/CD, and we've moved a lot of the controls for deploying into pipelines, thankfully. And within the context of GitOps the Planet, I mean, let's start here, Anais. Is there any reason that most developers should have access to deployment environments?
No.
Right?
No. Thinking about, I mean, I did made a lot of content on GitOps, right? But generally, there's like GitOps best practices you shouldn't, right? That's the whole point of of implementing GitOps best practices. But also, I guess it's one part, like how do you limit access for anything that's already within your supply chain to be modified, right? Like anything manually. And that's like what GitOps can help with a lot. But what I guess security scanners target, and why you need something like security scanners from within your supply chain is mainly for all those automated workflows to be controlled. Like, for example, anything that's installed from some Helm registry or so on to control that on a regular basis, on what kind of access rights are those resources granted, or what kind of containers are they running, did the containers that these tools are running change, and so on. Anything that's basically not in a manual way, versus GitOps can help to restrict all of the manual things that can cause security issues, right? Such as people introducing issues. That's how I would just think that. Yeah.
Like, so let's start with like even just packages. So like you're using NPM or you're using Golang packages or whatever. Most organizations that I'm aware of don't keep local copies of those. They don't keep some sort of secure registry for those things. They reference the public ones. And we've seen stability issues from things like the pad left incident, where, for those that don't remember it, basically a developer was very disgruntled and unhappy that they were maintaining a package, and that I think the issue was
they deleted it, right?
Maintain it or something. And so he deleted the package. And so suddenly everybody woke up, and it was like a very common package that everybody was using, and suddenly all their builds were failing. Now, in that case, there wasn't danger to production because, hey, those packages had already been shipped and there was no issue there. But there was another incident where a security team at a university did I think it was very poorly viewed, because essentially what they did is they tricked Linux into merging a malicious patch. And it didn't actually do anything malicious, but it was designed to be malicious.
Yeah.
And basically to show how easy it was to get something like that merged into main, and people were pretty mad about it. But that means that people could be potentially bringing stuff. When you have external actors that are responsible for part of your supply chain, your software, they could modify that, or maybe they get hacked. Maybe they get attacked and something gets pushed, a malicious package gets pushed, and suddenly you're deploying software that has backdoors in it, or keyloggers or whatever.
It's, I guess, what you mentioned, the trade-off between having on-demand access to, oh God, no, don't make me big. Don't. I don't like this.
We usually
I'm shy. And it's the thing is, the lighting is not very good when it's dark outside. Anyway, that's a different topic. You have to give me advice on your lighting, because it's a lot better than mine. Anyway, what you mentioned is the on-demand access to packages and different software resources, right? And also the latest versions, right? Like you can install on demand, you can download with every build, I guess, the latest packages, right? And use those. And in some cases that will be better to some extent. But for example, banks or other more regulated industries, right? They keep local copies, and they are required to keep local copies, and use those instead. But then in that case, it's so obviously the deploying any updates is going to be a lot slower, because they will have to cross-check those packages of the case they want to make updates to those as well, right? So there's this added kind of workflow and task that you will create if you want that. Like there's very little point for lots of smaller companies as well to do that, right? Also to pay for having local copies of all of your resources. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an expense to that. And I don't know of that many solutions that are designed to help you store all external binaries in some sort of locally controlled way. I think JFrog Artifactory is probably one that people use, and I think that's quite a good idea, though it can be, prohibitively expensive. And the other option is using something like Trivy. And I think Trivy doesn't just scan. I mean, you can scan Docker images, but it will actually look at the packages that are installed on that Docker image, right?
So exactly, it will not only look at the packages or like any resource that are used within your container image themselves, but also the third-party references. So anything that those packages use, like, and it can tell you what's the dependency tree like. Now Trivy, there's lots of different types of scanning. So basically, any resource that you're using across your supply chain, you can scan with Trivy likely. And it will tell you like vulnerabilities that are in your container images or other resources, most likely container images and file systems and so on, packages you're using, libraries, as well as misconfigurations of, like, for example, your Kubernetes YAML manifests, Helm charts, and so on, like anything that's misconfigured that could lead to additional issues. And while you're in the process of automating things, that is Trivy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to highlight this because it is open source. And I mean, we talked beforehand, like, hey, let's make sure we do some Trivy stuff. But it is open source, so anybody can use it. It's free. And it looks like it's been pulled over 58 million times from Docker.
Oh, wow, I've never looked at that.
Pretty cool. So it's obviously used quite a bit. And yeah, container images, file systems, Git repo, virtual machine image, Kubernetes, AWS, and finding any CVEs and things like that. And let's start with the scanning side of this. And so if we think about like the software development deployment process, there's actually a really great standard out there called Salsa. Which are you familiar with Salsa? Is this something you've seen? Supply chain artifacts?
I've heard of it.
So they have a pretty cool spec that gives you a very clear line on how you're doing with your. Let's see. Let's do levels.
Is it something like benchmark scans?
So it's more like you can use it more like a report card for yourself. So like, okay.
Oh, like a check of where you're scanning, like which type of resources you're scanning across your lifecycle, development.
Well, yeah, not just scanning, but like, okay, first of all, your source code needs to be version controlled because you need to be able to have verifiable history. Are all of the commits signed? So this is like a whole lot of things that goes into the supply chain. And scanning is going to be one of these things where, for example, all of your builds should be isolated. So, and reproducible. So they really should be automated, right? So like if you're doing a build locally and pushing an artifact, that is a huge red flag because you don't have any controls on that. And it's like, you're just relying on the developer to be awesome. It's like, hey, this developer, they're super good. Don't worry about it. They always scan their artifacts before they upload it. And it's like, why are they building it anyway? It's really stupid. Like that's what CI/CD pipelines are doing. So you should have it automated. You should have a build service. It needs to be isolated so that other components can't mess with it. It needs to be reproducible. And then on the provenance side, we get into this attestations and stuff, which is, can you actually look at the image and see where it came from? Can you verify that it was built with this system? And then we get into like the tooling that exists within Kubernetes, such as Kyverno and OPA Gatekeeper, where you can actually verify those attestations. So you could actually make something like, okay, I have an attestation that Trivy has run and scanned this and found that there were no major vulnerabilities, and I can sign that in a keyless way. And then even if someone gained access to my supply chain, even if somebody gained access to push to my Docker registry or whatever and override a tag, it's not going to be accepted by the Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah. That makes sense. Trivy is actually integrating with Cosine in case people want to use and create attestations for their builds.
Oh yeah. So this is, I mean, we talked about Salsa. So Cosine, do you want to introduce Cosine as a project for people that may not be aware of it?
Oh, so basically you can create to any container image that you can create some form of metadata that's attached to that image. It's basically saying if I built my image from my, for example, Docker Hub account, that I'm the one who built that image. And basically on that image attached to it is kind of like a public key that is attached to my account, and only I can create that metadata with my private key that says that this is my image, because I should be the only one who has that private key, but everybody else can, through the public key, verify that this is my attestation. That is the image that I've created. It cannot be, unless people have my private key to create an attestation for similar container images, they can't create something, like they can't create a container image that looks like it's from my account. That's kind of the point of Cosine. So
yeah, I mean, for people that aren't aware of public key encryption, this is like the whole internet is built on this. It is super secure. You can have a public key. I mean, every website basically has public key encryption based on which is what SSL is doing. And it's a way that it's basically a one-way mathematical equation where you can automatically verify that this was signed by whoever controls this public key. And so you can match those up and make sure it's working. So super important and for the security side. And I've messed a little bit around with Cosine. I made like an Argo workflows template for this. Let's see, where is it?
of Cosine.
Yeah, we're for Cosine. So we have this workflow template for Argo Hub. Yeah, and here's the Cosine image that I made just to play with this, which is basically, you pass in a key and a password, and within the context of CodeFresh, this key might be, or even just Argo workflows, this key might be something that's stored just on the Kubernetes cluster. So it just verifies, hey, it was built by this cluster, and you can have, lockdown permissions around that. You should. And then this one right now, actually, I didn't add any support for adding the attestations, which is something that maybe I should do next, is added some support for attestations so that we can say like, yeah, Trivy scanned this. We're all good.
Yeah. That'd be nice.
Something that there was a comment on Twitch from Kunthar Deman. Not saying that correctly, but they were pointing out this XKCD, which is we all imagine that, oh man, I've got like super excellent encryption. Nobody's going to be able to break it. But what actually happens is they're like, hey, just hit him with this $5 wrench until he tells us the password. So it's like, oh, your security is really, really good. But like at some point, like people are a big bottleneck for security. And this goes back to another hack that recently happened. Did you follow the LastPass hack?
Oh, a little bit. It was through somebody's private laptop, somebody's work laptop, or I don't know, private laptop with the vault of the company vault. LastPass was accessed, right? And so they had access to all of the logins that person had access to. But how do you, did the laptop get stolen? How do you have access to the laptop now?
It's so much worse than that. So,
oh my God, no.
This senior engineer at LastPass had a Plex server running on their home network, and the Plex server, I guess, was out of date and had a security vulnerability. So they were able to get into his network through Plex. And then once they were onto his network, they were able to escalate and get a keylogger stored on the developer's laptop. And then once he entered his password in LastPass, then they were able to gain access to the LastPass vault. So it started very small. And then, I mean, security, it's all about escalating, right? So you just get
it triples down
and escalate it up. And so
I use that statistics a lot in my talks. They're about like a few million exposed clusters, like just openly accessible. It shouldn't be openly accessible. The statistic obviously varies, but there's just so many clusters and networks of those clusters that it's just just there, right? Just because people accidentally use load balancers,
they're used to, it's easier to work with a cluster API that's exposed to the internet. You don't have to VPN in or anything like that. And I mean, if you're just setting it up or whatever, that makes sense. But within the context of GitOps, one of the whole points of GitOps is like you don't actually need that stuff to be exposed because you have a GitOps operator that's actually taking and syncing changes and deploying them. And that works, that's part of your supply chain is how that stuff actually gets deployed and what's exposed and where. Yeah, it's an issue for sure.
The thing is, people prefer to install things manually, right? Because it's easier. If there's so many different configurations, how do you know you do the right thing? So it's much easier to just do ad hoc changes. A lot. I mean, that's kind of what I tell people, why to use, like, also right from the beginning when you're getting started with Kubernetes, to use misconfiguration scanners. Like, that helped me so much to get started with misconfiguration scanners because it would tell me all the things I would forget to configure in my cluster, right? Like in my, I don't know, Terraform, or just my basic YAML manifests, right? Just components that you don't necessarily use unless you really like thorough in the setup of the configurations. Yeah, because everything is just, especially like with AWS, for example, with those services, setting those up manually, you will do something wrong.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, it's like having checks in place. It reminds me of I think I might have told this story on stream before. Maybe Anais, I think I probably told you the story before. But when I was a kid, we went and visited a local municipal airport, and it was like a bunch of kids my age, and the air traffic controller was showing us around and explaining how it works, and he was showing pointing out the different airplanes, and he was like, oh, these airplanes, we call these doctor killers. And we're like, doctor killer? That doesn't sound like a good name for an airplane. Why do you call it that? And it's like, well, doctors have a lot of money, so they buy this fancy plane that has retractable landing gear. And doctors, when we're training pilots, we tell them to follow their checklist. But doctors are so smart that they don't think they need to follow a checklist. So they come in with their landing gear not down, and they land with no landing gear, and they crash their plane and they die. And so
it's like planes that doctors fly themselves.
Yes. They're very successful, so they buy their own plane, and they buy a really nice one that has retractable
to fly themselves.
Yeah,
not for somebody. Oh God,
right. It's a private airport, right? So there's the private airplanes that are flying around.
You might as well fly your own if you have nothing else to spend your money on. And
oh my gosh, I would love to become a fly my own plane. And my grandpa, what am I talking about? My grandpa did fly early for World War II, but my father-in-law was a pilot for Delta for 50 years, and for a while he had his own plane that he could fly around and stuff, and he's managed to do it. But
nice.
I mean, that's just it's really a story about the importance of checklists, right? And it's like when it comes to software delivery, the best way to enforce a checklist is with an automated process, right? So if you've got a CI/CD process and it's like, look, we have a security policy. When our CI/CD, we sign our builds, we do scans on everything that we build to make sure that some external actor couldn't slip in a package or update a package with something and get it into our software. We can check that and make sure that it's safe. And then we can sign everything and make sure that when it's passed off into Docker Hub or whatever registry we're using, and our GitOps agent picks up to deploy this thing, we also have checking that makes sure that those attestations and those signatures are there. So it's like, okay, all these checks are happening. They're all automated. And I think that's a big part of this because developers get overburdened, right? If you try to give them a checklist of stuff to do, it's like,
yet another thing to hand out. It's similar with not just like to verify the sources of different artifacts, but also for your own resources, whatever you're using, to continuously check what are the vulnerabilities that you might be having there, that you might like want to remove as much as you can, right? So that's definitely something for which you should check continuously. And it's easier to ignore if you have, like, if you just do a scan on your local machine and it throws some critical vulnerabilities at you, right? You can just ignore it and and update everything anyways. But if your pipeline fails, it's much more visible, right? Like you have to make this conscious decision of that there's going to be like a trail left that you decided to still allow the pipeline to pass or just ignored it, the fail or whatever, right? Versus just if it's just on your local machine, nobody will know.
Yeah. Do you have guidance? I mean, does Aqua give guidance on like how to think about low or moderate security vulnerabilities? Because sometimes, like I know, someone will scan like an image and it will be like, okay, this image is built on Ubuntu, and Ubuntu shipped with there's a minor vulnerability on this one binary where if you're doing a certain thing, it could be an issue. But in practicality, it's like there's not really a way for anybody to exploit that from my service because of the nature of the vulnerability. Like, is your advice like don't deploy anything with only high severity, or is it, does it depend on the application, or what's been the approach that you've had?
So I can't speak for Aqua Enterprise. I don't know what they recommend, like what the solution architects and so on recommend people to do. So I don't want to comment on their name. But basically what I tell people to do is if you have lots of vulnerabilities, right? If there's above a certain number, especially like vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, you should look into one by one and really like try to fix them, because it's just such a one-time thing to do it. With vulnerabilities, however, if you have lots and lots of them, try to really update as many of the libraries and packages that you have within, for example, your container image, and like anything that you feed into your container image, and try to optimize your container image builds to reduce the size of it. And then you can already reduce lots of vulnerabilities through that. If you have critical vulnerabilities, I guess you should try to fix them with critical ones. That's what I tell people. But ultimately, it will depend on, it obviously depends on your setup. But the thing is, for you to, for the average person to take the time and understand the vulnerability, understand if it's going to be like an impact within their setup, probably takes a lot more time than trying to just remove the vulnerability altogether, or I don't know, not remove necessarily the package, but try to find like a workaround. It's probably way faster for the average person. And that's not something that I tell people. That's like what I've heard other people as well tell our community.
Yeah, I wonder if some people I mean, in our case, like in most setups I see, they're scanning and they're recording the results of those scans, and then they only will showstopper is like critical vulnerabilities, and other things they'll maybe let pass. Another option you could do is like in a CI/CD pipeline. So for example, CodeFresh has this really cool approvals feature within CI/CD where you can ask, you require approvals, and you could do something like, hey, once you pass a certain vulnerability threshold, you need approvals from 2 people, and it's from this team to say, yeah, go ahead and move this forward. And other than that, it's a showstopper. And that way, because you have to balance things where it's like, well, what if I'm shipping? What if I find there's new critical vulnerabilities? What if I'm shipping a fix for a 0-day vulnerability, and I don't want to not ship this container because I haven't fixed these other important vulnerabilities. I want to ship this critical one. So having something in your automated process that allows you to say, okay, I'm going to approve this change. We 2 of us got together. We agreed that we were going to sign off on this to move it forward because we don't want to hold up the process for getting these other things fixed.
Yeah. I think in CodeFresh in that case is a great example. This is a great example. On how to do that through manual approval. I guess in other cases, people will tend to just let the pipeline fail if they're, for example, critical issues in less sophisticated CI/CD pipelines, right? That don't have that manual check or like those additional conditions that you can set up.
Yeah. Have you seen any other either crazy exposures or really high requirements from your role in Aqua? Have you seen any other interesting implementations for security scanning beyond just hey, let's throw a security scan
Yeah.
on here, or like people suddenly realizing that they had way more CVEs than they realized once they got the scanner in place?
I mean, it usually, I guess, you see, I wonder how many people, for example, who it would be interesting because, so basically, we have statistics, right, from companies such as Armo. They are running Cubescape, which is an open source security scanner that's also within the CNCF. And they had that before it was donated to the CNCF. They had it connected to their internal platform. So basically, the open source tool in that case fed all of the user data to the company itself. From what I've seen, like from their presentations and stuff. Now, don't quote me on that. It might have been different, but like because I haven't talked to them directly, right? But that's how it looked like. So they had access to like I don't know, several thousand customer or like user data of like their scans, how many vulnerabilities and so on they have, right? But those are from the people who implemented their security scanner. And I wonder from like companies such as Codefresh of another CI/CD pipelines such as Circle CI or so on, how many of their users actually use security scanning within their pipeline? And also like do something about it, or like have, for example, like you mentioned, those additional steps in place, because those are information that we don't have, right? We only have the information from people who already use security scanning, not from people who don't use security scanning. So when people usually, especially individuals, get started with security scanning, like I've seen people post screenshots also on Twitter of like, I don't know, in one container image, 500 CVEs, right? Nobody's going to go through 500 CVEs. That's insane. That doesn't make any sense to look at it. And that's something that's called vulnerability fatigue, where you look at it and you're like, this is just too much to deal with. You can't be bothered. And then you just deploy anyway, because ultimately for you to have a running application, right, for your customers to be happy in the short term, I would say, you don't need to fix security issues, right? You can have the worst security in the world. Nobody will know. Like, I don't know the security that my bank has in place, right? It's something that's behind the scene. Like, I just hope, right? I just trust them. And that's like with every other tool. I just trust them that they have it in place. Because ultimately, once users do care, it's too late, because then they are forced to care because they heard, for example, LastPass. Would you use LastPass now after you heard that? Probably you would use an alternative right now. And that's when customers are made to
You'd
care
use
about.
one that hasn't been hacked yet.
Yeah, exactly. And then you kind of filter the worst, like the best of the worst.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
it's that the vulnerability fatigue is real. I remember when we were going through Argo graduation, and of course Argo is
Yeah.
graduated now, but
Yeah.
part of that was we really implemented a lot more security scanning into our processes, and we found that there were a lot of low-level CVEs in older, images and things and like that. And so we had to go
Yeah.
through and do a lot of updating and tweaking to our processes to get to the point where, yeah, when we're shipping a container, we know that the vulnerability profile is very low. And a lot of those things, we're just updating packages. And this is actually the other side of supply chain security, is because we're talking about, hey, how do we keep bad stuff from getting into your builds? The other part of this is identifying the bad stuff you already shipped, because
That's true.
CVEs,
Yeah.
they're not for new software. They're for
Yeah.
old software, right? Nobody publishes a CV on something that's brand new because nobody's looked at it yet. And
Yeah.
in the case of, it was one of the major credit providers that, everybody has a credit score, and there's basically
Yeah.
like 3 different companies that provide the credit scores for those. Is that the
Yeah.
way it works in Europe too? Do those credit score companies, are they the same? Do you know what I'm talking about? Or is this a US only thing?
No, I know what you mean. I just don't know how it's regulated in Europe, because I just never really looked into my credit
But
score.
you have credit scores in Europe, I assume.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I've used it once, but I don't know if they're like, I think there are a few companies that can generate the score, but it depends on the information they get from your bank. So the scores are highly similar. But yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. So there's
Mhm.
basically like 3 or 4 companies that do it. And then when you get your credit score, it's basically an
Yeah.
average of those companies, and that's how they
Yeah.
kind of do this.
Okay.
And There was a very famous hack a few years ago where one of these companies had an old server that people were able to gain access to it, and they were able to escalate that, and they basically stole data from anybody that's ever had a credit card. So your name, your social was all in this hack. And it was because this server was 2 years out of date.
Yeah.
So the other part of supply chain security is actually development velocity. Do you have a process to automatically pick up and bring in, updates of packages and things like that and validate them and deploy those?
Yeah.
Because the strategy of it ain't broke, I don't need to fix it. I mean, that's the same case with Plex. It was an old version for the LastPass guy that he was running, and it had vulnerabilities that were known. Like there's, I think we have this sense of like this image of hackers is like from the movies where they're like, oh, I'm figuring out a new hack to how to get into the NSA, and I'm probing their firewalls, and I'm figuring out like I'm engineering a novel attack. And it's like, that's not the way it works. Like the way it works is hackers just have a scanner running that's like, oh, I'm looking for anybody with an exposed API running this version or lower, and if they are, then I'm going to automatically inject my package to take on that.
Yeah.
So it's really all about the known CVEs a lot more than it is about novel attacks.
That's why we also have for Trivy, you can run a Kubernetes operator, the Trivy operator in your cluster. So like, let's say you have container images installed that you hardly ever update, right? They're just like maybe running a side containers or for like some automated tasks or something, right? I don't know, like anything that you don't update on a regular basis. Or I guess if your company doesn't update things regularly, then all your stuff's going to get checked. But yeah, it scans anything that changes in your cluster on a continuous basis. Like anything, whenever it detects a change in your cluster, it will scan it. And then basically it can report you the vulnerabilities or misconfigurations or exposed secrets and other things that are already within your cluster, which is quite handy. Like if somebody is, for example, what I used to do a lot of times is like when you have to debug things, right? You have to spin up a resource and then you sometimes forget about it. And right, that happens. So things like that it will notify you about.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like that's where most of the stuff is happening. So having it both, okay, on my supply chain, I'm building this stuff in such a way, but also I'm actually monitoring proactively. And so when a CVE is discovered, I get an alert about it, and I know, okay, there's a CVE in something that we already have, and we need to have, a plan for how we're going to get that updated or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you so we were talking about vulnerability fatigue a second ago. Any tips to help people deal with it? Is it just, hey, do yoga in between, take a deep breath, make sure that you're, take a nature walk, or is there something more practical from a processes standpoint that you've seen successful?
I think what a lot of companies do is they have a specific team, right? They have like a specific person who's responsible to fix things, right? Like that's their job of like, you go, you fix things, which I don't think is very effective. Like something like security should be spread out across like the team with certain people taking different roles. It's not something like shift left, right? Like when we talk about shift left and we talk about like GitOps empowering all of our engineers to be able to make updates and changes, I think that's very different to how we should deal with security. Because if we just say, oh, you're all empowered to do security scanning, here's the tools, nobody will do it, because it's not like necessarily, that doesn't mean it's a requirement. It doesn't mean
if everybody's responsible, nobody is.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what security shifting left looks in my mind. So I wouldn't do that as if I would set up a team, I wouldn't do that. What I would do is make certain people responsible and adapt also like kind of the themes that you have within site reliability engineering, and like run books and documentation around how to handle certain security issues, similar to how you do with incident management. I think that's something that can become very effective. and also very empowering to people. Now, what I would recommend people, if you have vulnerability fatigue, reduce the amount of information those security scanners give you. What some companies do is they set up security scanning for all of their resources, for everything, and then they are overwhelmed that everything is terrible. So what I would recommend people is to, for example, just look at the critical issues. Start with your most critical components of your infrastructure and your application, and then expand from there versus looking at everything at once, because there's little point if you don't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah. Start with the most critical stuff, and expand and start trying to standardize it. And if you can get ahead of it, something that we've done within the Argo project is we have some bots that check for updated package versions and things like that. It'll automatically open pull requests. And there's great tooling out there for that. And I can't remember the name of it. Maybe somebody in the chat will point it out. But that's made it so we call those chores. So like we tag those PRs as chores, because it's like, hey, I'm not adding a new feature. I'm literally just updating a package. And so if I have a good CI/CD process, then I'm probably going to be able to validate that package works and that my binaries work. My tests are going to run properly. So you really can't. I think you really can't get ahead of it until you actually have a good CI/CD process in place that's actually validating stuff. Because then merging, an updated package that gets rid of a CVE, hey, that's mostly automated. All the tests are automated. All I'm doing, and you could even do some like automated approvals on some of these things if you wanted, once you have really good confidence in your tests. But if without good testing, you're dead in the water, and that vulnerability fatigue, it seems like it's going to overwhelm you.
Yeah. Totally. That's a good example. Look at how other projects are doing it. But the thing is, not many open source projects are doing it properly, right? I would say, because they're just like a one-off thing, kind of, right? In a way. Or maybe, I don't know. Why would you say lots of open source projects are not using their own tool, or like treating their own tool as an organization would treat their application, right?
Well, yeah, and we also had somebody volunteer in the Argo project to implement fuzz testing, which is really cool. So fuzz testing is very time consuming and resource intensive, but it goes beyond just running your integration tests and things like that. It actually goes and starts like pushing the boundaries of, flipping variables so they're outside of scope and seeing what happens. Because anytime you have some kind of buffer overflow or something, oftentimes those things are the beginning of a vulnerability. Did you see this thing about Pixel phones crashing when you try to watch a certain video on YouTube?
No.
So this was just yesterday. I was seeing this. There was it's a clip from Alien, the movie, and it's an HDR, and there's a flaw in Pixel phones where if an HDR value is off, it will cause the software to crash.
That's interesting.
So you can, if you have a Pixel phone, you can go pull up this video, and if you try to watch
do you? Did you try?
I do have a Pixel phone, and I didn't try it, but I assume
why not? Try it live.
You want me to try it live? Okay, that's fine.
I don't know. I'm curious.
Pull up the video. Okay. We'll see. Maybe mine will crash. Maybe it won't crash. The reason I bring it up though is because there's like, just looking at this, my sniff test is it's very likely that there is a vulnerability here. That you could potentially exploit this. So the fact that it's crashing is a problem for stability, but it also probably means that there's some hack that somebody could figure out how to do.
Are you opening the video?
Yeah, I'm pulling up. So there's a Reddit thread about it. Okay. All right, so I've got the Reddit thread up, and I'm going to go ahead and tap the link, and let's see if it crashes my phone or not. Let's open it in the YouTube app.
How long is it?
Watch, this stream's gonna get like content striked because I'm playing this alien clip. It's not crashing right now.
Maybe you should have it on the whole screen. Turn it.
Oh, wait, it says edit. There was a fix that was pushed. So this was 4 days ago, and they've pushed the fix since then. So I probably got the fix in here. Or maybe it's somewhere else in the video. It's like a 4-minute long video. So I don't know.
Let it play in the background.
Yeah, I'll let it play down here. You just won't be able to see it. So if it crashes, we'll call it out.
Cool. I haven't looked into fuzzing. Kiakon says fuzzing would not really have caught something like that necessarily. I haven't looked into fuzzing. I'm just looking into chaos engineering and how chaos engineering can also improve not only reliability but security.
Well,
that's what
very similar concept. It's like chaos engineering inside of your app, like going and changing variables to stuff that they should never be changed to see what happens and see how your application handles it.
So chaos engineering is more like post deployment.
Well,
and fuzzing is like pre-deployment in the app, or is it that's not the distinction? I
mean, usually when I see chaos engineering, it's often an infrastructure where they have like a chaos monkey that's going around and just like shutting off services and then like, okay, what happens? Whereas, I mean, fuzz testing, it does feel similar to chaos engineering in that you're going and like just changing variables and things like that to see what happens. Someone from the chat, Sayakon, says that fuzz testing may not necessarily have caught something like this YouTube bug, which is probably true. I mean, it's a little bit more random. So I don't know if, let's see, what are you saying? Coming from someone who tests network video products and testing for nearly a decade. Oh, okay. So maybe fuzz testing isn't the answer for the Android case. Well, something else that you mentioned before we started the stream, Anais, was that you wanted to actually do maybe a little bit of live implementation of.
Oh yeah, you're gonna share your screen.
Oh, do you want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You're gonna guide me because you're the.
It should be pretty straightforward. If you have a pipeline you can use in CodeFresh.
Yeah, let me.
It should be pretty straightforward. We'll see.
Okay, so here I am. I'm inside my CodeFresh account, and
awesome.
Let's see. I haven't built anything in a little bit of while for here.
Oh,
this one's okay. This one's a weekly build. That's okay for it to be because I got rid of the runtime, so that's fine. I'll fix that later.
Do you have any application where you can build a container image?
Yeah, let's see. I've got one that I use a lot called Color Coded. I haven't updated it in a while, so I bet that we could find some sort of failure on this thing.
We could scan the container image you're building and see how bad it is.
Let me look at. I bet I have one deployed even. Oh, you know what? There's a cool feature inside of CodeFresh. This is a good thing to point out. So this is showing me an images that are currently deployed. And so I've got this colors image that's currently
on
deployed.
Your cluster.
Yeah, this one's in staging. This one's in a staging instance or whatever. Let's pull up this. Here we go. And this one is actually running. Oh, this one's building with an Argo workflows. So I've got this one in Argo workflows, but let's do it. And then I shut down the Argo workflows instance. So
what's the difference between Argo workflows in that case and using a pipeline to build and deploy your?
Yeah, so we
have. Yes, but you have to have it built before the workflow, or does it also build?
No, so it also builds. So we have within CodeFresh, we have CI/CD. My YouTube down here is just like playing random videos now.
You want to remove the comment on the screen. It's a bit, now it gets annoying.
Oh, right.
Thank you for your comment, though.
Yeah, it was a good comment. So within CodeFresh, we have CI/CD, which is this is a CI/CD engine that we built years ago and have developed and managed and really improved. And it's a really cool CI/CD. I think it's the one that you're most familiar with, Anais, because we do automated caching, and there you can do live pipeline debugging, all these kinds of things. And then we have Argo workflows. So if you're using Argo workflows, and the reason you would want to use it is like, I've got a build where I need to be able to take advantage of resources from multiple nodes on a Kubernetes cluster. That's where Argo workflows would be better. So it's better for really big scale kind of things, like you're doing big machine learning. You need 15 GPUs inside of a pipeline. The way you would have to do that with CodeFresh CI/CD is you would basically make a pipeline of pipelines, but then you're having to manage passing information between things. So cases like that are also cases of like Kubernetes native events, like I want to run a workflow every time a new resource is added to Kubernetes. That's easier to do with Argo workflows. So that's the difference. But let's just I'm just going to make a new one. We'll call this one Anais Live. And let's see, we'll make a nice little.
The diamond. What is the diamond for?
Ruby on Rails. And we're not doing
Oh, but there's Aqua. There's our old logo. Where do you have our old logo? Left. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
No, that's
to the right of AWS. No.
Right. Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's do that. All right.
So our old logo. Why is it there? I need to update that.
Because we do have some pipeline steps for doing Aqua security scans. So like the enterprise ones. But let's do like we'll do one in here. So I'm gonna grab my color-coded app. I have a Docker file in there, and I'll create a pipeline. And so by default, it's gonna clone my repo. It's gonna run my build, and it would run tests, which in this case, I don't have any tests in here. So it's just gonna run an LS, which is fine. So I could run this and
it's gonna work?
Probably.
Okay, let's see that it works, and then we add the Trivy scanning to it.
Okay. Cool. All right, so we'll fire off a build. And this one, it looks like I'm using just the hosted build minutes. So it's not relying on my own instance running or anything, which I honestly need to make a nice demo account because I am always setting stuff up and tearing it down. And so I'll forget.
You should have something nice prepared.
Yeah, that would be smart. That would be smart. Cool. All right, so
open Trivy.
Okay.
In the meantime, well, this is running. This is gonna run, right?
Yeah. It's running. So okay, Trivy, we've got a Docker image, right?
We could use it. We could use it. Yeah, we could use the Docker image.
Would you recommend something different?
Oh, I just don't know how to. I don't know anymore how CodeFresh works with Docker images.
Okay, so each step in the pipeline is
a Docker image
running in its own container. And so this freestyle step, we're basically going to make one of these. So while this is running.
Okay, so let's use the Trivy image then and create. Cool. I would have done what CodeCoff did with the curl, just downloading the package and installing it, and then using the Trivy command. But
we could do that too. But here we'll do a freestyle.
But that's like the thing you don't want to do, right? So you want to actually use the container image.
Yeah.
Don't use this one. Don't use the
Aqua one. This one is for like Aqua Enterprise, I guess.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do is I'll make a freestyle script. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna change the image to be the Trivy one. And I would prefer to put a version on here. But I guess I could just pull it.
It's from Docker Hub. You should be able to find it. I think so. You should be able to find no, don't use the latest.
Don't use latest?
No, it's just on supply chain security. You can't do that. It's funny because I haven't done that, like this kind of process before. I probably should have. Yeah.
And cool. if we run into any issues, well, I'm wondering actually for security scans, I could put a version on it, but does this?
Yeah, use the version that was released today. Huh?
Will this automatically get the new libraries, or like how often should I update this image?
Oh, so basically we have a major release on a monthly basis. And then on you should check weekly. If there's an update, I guess.
So I'd want to have actually, as part of my supply chain security, I'd want to have an automated way to update this version. Because you guys don't recommend using the latest version.
Well, you could use the latest in our case, but it's just in general, I guess you don't necessarily. The thing is, if you use the latest one, it could happen that your command's just gonna break, because sometimes we are deprecating or like changing existing commands. So if you're using within your pipeline certain commands like that are very specific maybe, or like not the standard ones, then we might change them for better user experience. So if you just use the latest tag, it could happen that your pipeline just gonna break because of that with a new major release. Not with a minor one, but like on a yeah.
Okay. And if I wanted
But-
to scan an image,
yeah.
I could just pass in the image. Does it need to be local, or will it pull it from Docker Hub?
It will by default pull from Docker Hub, but you could also specify any other registry.
Okay.
But you want to scan the one that you developed, that you're building here now in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think so. So what we'll do is I'm going to take this and
Did you copy it?
I'm
You did.
going to put it in here. And right now it's not going to run a scan. Okay, it's just going to load up the image. And yeah, we can see that this build executed the way we expected it to. And what we can do is I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to run it in debug mode. And what we'll do is we'll set a breakpoint inside of the scan, which I didn't even put it inside of a. I didn't put it inside of a step, so I should change that. So I'll go to edit my pipeline here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a stage. I'll put it under the testing stage. So, and we could name this anything. So let's also name this like run Trivia scan. And we could actually turn this into an official code fresh step after this. So, okay, I've added my breakpoints on it. We'll continue. And what this is going to do is it's going to drop me into a the container so I can debug it live. Though actually, since I'm using the hosted version, it's going to limit the commands that I can execute for security reasons.
Yeah.
So we'll see how useful that is. But once I'm in here, I should be able to just add in, basically just tell it to run a scan. So what's the command that you run to run a scan?
So run Trivi image. And then you specify you can use your container image from above. The today was awesome, color coded, and then the tag.
Yeah, so it's going to be. Could parameterize this, but I'm not going to do it right this second. And then here I'm going to put in a variable for my clone step, which will be the tag, which is set to be the branch tag normalized. I mean, I should do it this way. And then I think I need to put this whole thing in. So we'll do the substitution. Let's see. So this is going to, let's see. Oh, it failed. Well, what failed? Step running Docker image failed. Set breakpoint to debug step. Oh, what was the output? That's interesting. Because did you try this before just by installing the binary?
Yeah, but I didn't actually try that.
Oh, okay. All right, well, let's try it with this where we're actually going to just try running the scan. I suspect that it won't have access to the Docker registry without us doing a little bit more work, but let's try it. Why not? I'm curious why this one failed. Maybe it was unable to find working directory of step clone step name. Oh, so my working directory is set incorrectly. Okay, so that was my bad. Let's go back and edit this. So I have this working directory that's set, and it should be whatever the step name is of the clone. So this one, the name is actually clone. So that's why it failed. So I just need to change the working directory to match this one.
Oh, because you copied it from the example.
Yeah, and it didn't update it for me. So this one will fail. We can just stop it. And then this one we can run. And this one will run in debug, and we'll drop into the directory. Check it out. And now we've got it in the test spot, and we've got our debug set, and we're ready to go. Okay.
Now we wait.
And now we wait. The build should run pretty quick because it just built the image, so it set up a cache. The way that CodeFresh works is each one of these runs in their own container, but they're all attached to one shared volume. And then that volume is actually packaged and saved and then reloaded. And so when I build my image, my cache is going to be there. And there are a lot of rules around how it handles those volumes to make it secure and safe and smart. But in this case, this should be able to run pretty quick and complete the build. And then we'll drop into the scan step. All right, so this guy's firing up. Running debugger override step, run trigger stem, see debug console. So that's going to pop up in 1 second here. There it goes.
Okay.
All right, so now we're in the debug environment, and we can look at our volume, and we can see the color-coded repo is here. And so can I actually just run Trivia in here? I should be able to. Yeah. Trivia.
Yeah. Nice.
So now I could try to access the Docker registry.
But it's going to run the scan by itself afterwards anyways, right?
Well, because I overwrote it, it's not going to run the scan.
It's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at this. It's pushed this image, and it pushed just to a master tag. So it's not a versioned one by default here. So that's okay. So we're just going to do master.
Trivia image?
Oh, yeah. We don't do trivia image, right?
Yeah, so it's for the first time when you ran it.
And it ran just fine. So if I had thrown it in debug, it looks like it would have worked just fine.
Yeah.
If your scanning is slow, tries this. Detected OS Alpine, detecting Alpine vulnerabilities, number of language specific vulnerabilities 0. This OS version is no longer supported by the distribution. Okay, but it didn't look like the vulnerability detection may be insufficient because security updates are not provided. Oh, what's that mean? So do I need to enable some sort of database update? It looks like it ran.
No, it ran.
Or is it because this Alpine version is so old that it's not like...
That could be. I don't know. What is the current Alpine version?
I mean, I'm sure it's very far from 3.3.
Okay, yeah, that could be that it's just, doesn't have sufficient information.
Let's see. They've released Alpine 3.17, and this one's running 3.13, so it's pretty old. But they still have updates actually for Alpine 13, 3.13.12.
Let me check with the engineers on what that's supposed to mean.
Let's see, 3.13.12. This was released August. It's not that crazy.
No.
And it looks like there were some CVEs that were fixed. So actually, this scan is just, I think this scan is just correct. Like, there are no vulnerabilities on it. And that would make sense because this image is pretty simple. I mean, I literally just load up basically it's a Golang package. I mean, it's so small, like this Docker file.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. It's funny that we're disappointed that we didn't find a vulnerability. Like, Dan, you should have been shipping vulnerable software. Like, I couldn't do it. But what are we doing here? I mean, we're pulling from Docker. We're pulling the latest point release for 3.13 Alpine. We're exposing a port. We're installing some certificates, and then the Go binary is like so simple. I mean, we literally have the basest bare bone packages, so that makes sense. This one didn't find anything because there was nothing to find.
Awesome.
Basically,
but it works.
is what.
Now we can make it a step.
All right, so we can continue this. Let it go. So yeah, okay. Implementing the Trivy scan with CodeFresh, even though it wasn't a step, just doing it as a freestyle, super easy. Part of this is because these steps automatically expose, like when I added a Docker Hub account to my CodeFresh account, I exposed it to this to my projects by default, so it's able just to use that to just connect and do what it needs to do. So that's really nice. That's really easy, honestly. Just
anybody can do it.
yeah, anybody can do it. So all we need to do to turn this into a step would be just parameterize the image so that people can specify that. And then
and we name it from freestyle. No, in that case, it's not freestyle, is it?
Well, we named it freestyle. So the type is a freestyle step. So if we go to let's go here. We have this big step library, right? So this is where we have Aqua is already listed. So if we go to create a step, it'll tell us how to do it. Oh, maybe we need to update this link. Where's like a contribute? Because I can actually make a step just for my account.
But an official one is maybe. I can do it afterwards. Add it to the documentation.
I think all we need to do actually is go
just
to
edit here.
GitHub repo for it. Yeah, so we need to update. We just updated our documentation. We did a big update, and I think that maybe is missing. So yeah, we would just go here and you can see we've got incubated and graduating ones. Let's look at the Aqua one that exists. I bet it's literally gonna be the same. Hang on, let me move off of this really quick. Okay, so yeah, we've got an Aqua step, and this one you can see this is the format for making your own, and use the metadata. You set images, you put a category, you make an example, and then you place in your arguments, and then the actual step itself, and what the variables are going to be. So we could totally fork this and make a step for Trivy. How are we doing on time?
We have 20 minutes.
One?
Let's start it.
Okay. So let's grab this guy and let's go ahead and fork this repo. I probably already have a fork. Yeah, I already have a fork. Do you want to fork it?
No. I can do it afterwards as well if you don't want to do it live.
No, that's okay. I'm always ready to embarrass myself live. I haven't made a step in quite a while. So, all right. So we just updated it. Let me pull open, clone this really quick. Grab that. Okay, so now I'm going to switch what I'm sharing to here. All right, so I got my CodeFresh steps. Let me change the size of this thing a little bit.
And it's just that one YAML manifest that we have to create. Oh, no, it's a lot more.
Well, it's basically that. So I'm just going to copy this folder really quick.
Call it Aqua Trivy, the new folder.
You want it to be called Aqua Trivy?
Yes.
Aqua.
Where is it?
Okay, I was just copying it. All right. So now.
I don't see it.
Oh, hang on.
It's the first step. Copy that.
Figure out how to copy the folder. Okay, I got it. All right. So, let's see. This is if it needs to build a Docker image.
It doesn't, does it?
We don't need to build the Docker image, so I'm going to delete that.
Mm.
The icon.
We changed that.
We have a Trivy icon we want to use.
Yeah. Well, let me. You should maybe Google Trivia logo. Maybe it's so fast. Otherwise, I can send one over.
Trivy logo.
Do you find something?
Yes, I found something.
Yeah, there are lots. Oh, nice. Okay.
So let me download this into my GitHub folder. We probably won't finish it, but we can at least get it started.
We can start it.
Why not? Okay. Okay, I just replaced. Here we go. There's Trivy. And then we need an icon, which I think is going to be the same. I don't know if there's any reason why they can't be the same, but all right. Now, version. Okay, we can probably start with 1. Let's call this one just Trivy Scam.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, wait. Do we need to use our own image? No.
But it's code for plugins.
No, let's use the official image. I don't see why not.
Oh, because it's not creating one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, makes sense.
So it's gonna be like that. Aqua
and then, yeah.
And we could make it do.
It can do really anything once you have the image.
Okay, we can just leave it.
Scan all of these sizes.
And then the source is going to be
Aquasec Trivia now. Oh, what does the source refer to?
Let's see. I think this is where the Docker image should be built from. So I don't think I need this. All right, maintainers. Anais. I spell your last name wrong almost every time I try to do it.
You are. Yeah, exactly. Cool.
We can fill
and then it's Anais.Urlichs@Aquasec. You want to put my email? Here's my email. Not that I check it, but you can try.
I'll put myself down as well.
Good.
All right, and then for environmental variables,
you don't need any.
Well, this is where
you don't log in.
We could have people just literally run it as an image, but the other option would be like we can set what type of scan we wanted to do or just what image to scan. So we could just do like
I would just let people put the commands. No?
Yeah, we could. We could do that. I don't see why not.
Like, did they use the step and then they just put their trivia command?
Well, then it's basically just telling them to just use the image. Rather than.
Oh, is that not? Oh, okay, then let's do then a container image.
Okay. So yeah, we'd probably just do something like image. We could make this optional. And the image.
Could we also say resource, and then you can specify maybe also a Git repository or I don't know, or your Helm chart or something instead?
Yeah, though
If
though
we don't
in that,
know.
we probably will need to add like some kind of startup script that will consume this logic and then execute it. But
What logic?
well, like if I just set a like if I said type, for example,
Yeah.
Docker versus Helm versus whatever, then I would need a little script that basically looks at that type and says, oh, if it's Helm, run this command. If it's Docker, run this command.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay, we can add that later on. Let's start with image first. Then.
Yes, we can just start with image maybe.
Cool.
So this is the kind of headline information, and then for the steps, so this one's going to be called, we'll call it Aqua Trivi.
Version 1.
A Trivi scan. And is public. We can leave that public for now. Execute an Aqua Trivi container security scan. That's what we're going to start with. And here, this is going to be Aqua Trivi. And we'll bring our maintainers back from our plugin file. Indent these. Category security, it's not official. Aqua dash.
Well, you're creating it. Co-founder of CodeFresh. It should be official.
Yeah, well, let's yeah. Well, we actually, so I think in order for it to be official, we will have to actually build the Docker image ourselves, but it could be based on the image anyway. But
okay, then it's unofficial.
Example scan, and let's do Trivi security scan type. Aqua Trivi. That's the name we gave it, was Aqua Trivi. So that needs to be a type now because we're creating it as its own type. And then the arguments we're going to have could literally just be image and tag. Okay. And then let's see, required image and tag will be required. And we can just get rid of these. We don't need them. We don't need this. Yep. Okay. And then here, we'll just change this to be the image that we referenced in the plugin file. And then the image and tag. And then do we need to put, I think we actually need to put the command in here.
Yeah.
This one's
Where
set
do you
up.
put it?
That
but
one
if you set the environment variable, if you set a command as environment variable, we could use the resource, right? We could say type of scan.
Yeah, you could. You could just literally put in a command because this one we would just put Trivi
image,
and then we would say and
dot tag. Okay. Cool. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, you're right. We could add an argument.
Saying
or
type,
command, but argument
scan type.
It's called action.
Now, what would action?
Command of action. And then we would just need to add what the action is going to be, and we could say like we could set it by default to be image. Or something like that. Anyway. Well, we're pretty close to time end, so we can play with this a little bit more. So I can add you to the repo too, and
yes,
we get it publicized. What do you think?
Awesome.
Productive little session. So Anais, as we head towards the close here, anything else you want to call out? Are you headed to KubeCon EU? You want people to check you out there, follow you on Twitter? You just came out with wrote a book.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. You can see the name here. Nobody can pronounce it, but do you hear that?
Urlichs, Anais, do you pronounce the S?
Yeah. Follow me on Twitter. Check out my YouTube and try out Trivy. Trivy is very straightforward to use. Try out Trivy. It's very easy to get started, and it's really targeted at anybody, even if you're getting started with containerization. It's for you. So use it and give it a star. We depend on stars now. But it's nice to have the stars. Yeah.
Definitely follow Anais on Twitter. She's great and very entertaining. As always, a couple of other quick things to mention. Next week we do have a show. Hang on, let me switch my screen here.
Is it a weekly show?
So I can call out what's coming up. There is also a webinar we have coming up tomorrow, Modernizing CI/CD. This one's going to be with Brandon Phillips and JJ Ashgar from IBM. And this one is going to be a pretty cool discussion. So if you haven't registered for this, definitely do that. Great. Should be a really good session with those folks. And then next week's, I think we have a stream next week coming up. Let's see, what's the one that's happening next week?
Who are you having over?
Sorry. Who am I having over? Let's see. I'm pretty sure I'm having folks. Oh yeah. The Loft folks are coming. So let me put it right here. So we're gonna do a session with Rich Burrows and Leanne Lee from Loft, and we're gonna be talking about how vCluster is changing the game. Also, as we always shout out, and I think it's always worth shouting out, definitely go get GitOps certified if you haven't yet. Anais, did you do the certification? GitOps certification with Argo?
No.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I should.
It's so good. It's so good. I can't believe how good it is. So definitely do that if you haven't. You can follow me on Twitter at Today Was Awesome. And with that, I think we'll sign off. Anais, any final words?
I'm happy.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining. This has been GitOps the Planet episode 8. And we've been talking about CI/CD and supply chain security. And we'll see you on the Twitters. We'll see you at KubeCon EU if you're going there. And with that, we're going to sign off. Bye, everybody.
Bye.